Hello, fictional. Welcome to the What If Issei. Today we are gonna see what if Issei is son of the Acnologia. Part 1. If you end up liking this video, please consider subscribe, so without further ado, let's get into the video. Supernaturally aware humans had it rough in Kuoh, or anywhere for that matter. Even the cleverest and strongest of humans without a sacred gear or other weapon were barely a match for a low-class stray devil. They get a sinking feeling that no matter how much discipline and focus they put towards their training, they still won't be able to live in peace. And since they're aware of the supernatural, they usually won't be ignored. Yeah, just knowing that there was a whole other world hidden beneath your own was a risk. Such was the case of the Hyoudou family. They were a simple, middle-class, three-person household with a son, Issei, a mother, Hinoka, and a father, Takeshi. Issei was a quick-witted kid with thick, constantly messed up brown hair and curious brown eyes to match, and he had a penchant for sticking his nose where it didn't belong. Most kids did. His father had short, messy black hair and wore thick glasses, giving him a businessman-like appearance. Though he had a small frame, he wasn't weak by any means. And finally, Hinoka, a woman of average height, had smooth brown hair down to her neck. Her bangs in the front were cut short, giving her a minorly tomboyish face. While Takeshi worked in an office, she mostly stayed at home to guard the house and watch Issei. The only thing that was unusual was that both of the parents knew magic. It was almost entirely a result of learning of the supernatural and searching for a way to combat it. See, before Issei was born, the married couple stumbled upon something they really weren't supposed to see, and they were never the same ever since. Both discovered that they possessed some aptitude for magic and were therefore a special type of human called a magician. Technically, they were stray magicians because they didn't want to affiliate themselves with any group, but they weren't powerful. Joining an official magician group would only drag them further into the world that they wanted to escape from. Sure, they had some rudimentary knowledge of the art, more than almost everyone else, though it wasn't like they could hold a candle to the immense power of legends like Merlin. So, yeah, in order to get the power they needed, they did something really stupid. Incredibly stupid. The reason they did something so drastic stemmed from the frightening events of the week prior. Issei was only 5 years old at the time, and already a stray devil had wandered through their areas and killed some of their neighbors. Obviously, they tried to stop it, yet the best they could do was hold it off until a devil arrived to kill it. They were powerless to defeat the monster, a problem they prayed they wouldn't have in the future. Now, here they were, poring over a musty arcane tome that they pilfered from the church. Kind of a ballsy move, considering the church was run by fallen angels, who, unlike their counterparts in heaven, have no qualms with killing humans for a simple unused book. Still, the information on teleportation spells was so dearly worth it. They'd be able to avoid anything that came after them to keep Issei safe. Takeshi. Issei's mother yelled. They're coming already. Did you figure anything out yet? While her husband tried to decipher the text and learn the one spell they'd need for the rest of their life, she was sensing for threats. Issei peacefully slept in his room. Hold on, I've almost got it, he replied. Wake Issei, we've gotta go, now. Honey, you better know what the hell you're doing. She didn't doubt him for a second though, since he was much better at space-time magic than her. He didn't bother to reply, flipping the page in the book and gazing intently at a diagram. Maybe there is a way to escape this after all, he thought quietly. He hummed to himself and adjusted his glasses as he studied the tome, transfixed by the promise one of the spells offered. No wonder the fallen really want this back. This could provide nearly endless opportunities. Mom, what's going on? Issei slurred tiredly as the two descended the steps from his bedroom. It was past midnight, and the poor kid could barely stand. There are some bad people after us, but mommy and daddy will take care of it. Right, honey. By the time she finished, they were standing right next to Takeshi, who was sitting cross-legged on the floor. Yeah, he answered, still focused. Change in plans, we're going to use this. He held the tome up with a hand and showed it to his wife. Her eyes widened. You can't use this. What if we end up somewhere hostile? What if we don't have enough magic power and it kills us? She said the last part quietly, as if she had accepted that this was a better idea, but still feared the inevitable risks. Think of it. We could give Issei a safe life, free of everything in this world. Maybe he could make something of himself. I have no plans of involving you in this spell, I'll do it myself. Teleporting around will only delay the inevitable. But this, he looked up, this is a chance at a new beginning. Issei was confused, but he had never seen his father so determined before in his life. He knew his father was much quieter and more selective with words than his mother, though the man rarely even outright denied her. Then again, Issei wasn't able to understand anything going on at the time, only that his father was incredibly serious for whatever reason. Without any further words, Takeshi took a piece of chalk, stood up, and began drawing a symbol on the floor. As the white substance rubbed off onto the wood, it emitted in both a painful screech and a violet glow. By the time he was finished inscribing the symbol, it was a meter-wide pentagram humming with energy. Hinoka, Issei. Get in the circle. There was a knock at the door. Shit, he cursed. Anoka nodded to him, many words being conveyed in a glance. I'll hold them off. You just worry about Issei. I need to know he's safe. With that, she nudged the young boy into the circle. I need you to stay here, okay? You can do that for me, right Issei-kun? The boy nodded, bewildered. I'm counting on you, honey. She faced the door and held out both hands, an odd blue light pouring from them and reinforcing a barrier around the house. This time the knock was a slam and the door nearly bounced off its hinges with a loud thud. Even at the cost of my life, I will see you safe. I hope this works, Takeshi mumbled to himself. He tossed a book into the circle with his son and began to chant in Latin. Issei gasped as the chalk outline began to glow. As that was happening, however, the light was fading from his father's eyes and he was beginning to slump forward, unable to muster the energy to keep himself upright. Takeshi's hair grew gray and his face lost its youthful definition, as if he aged 20 years in an instant. I love you Issei, Hinoka said, as her son's body began to glow the same white as the symbol. Me too, her husband added, the chant over, the energy fading. Mom? Dad? Wait. Don't go. Please. Issei cried, now able to see through his hand. His father fell on his face just as the door burst open and a man with black wings entered the room. You'll never find him or that book, Hinoka growled. The man was enraged by the proceedings, a wide-brimmed hat shadowing his features. What did you do? Issei's screams of protest were fading out as if someone had turned the volume down. And along with the sound his body and the book seemed ghostly translucent. Then, blinding light emerged from the pentagram and a sound equivalent of a thunderclap echoed through the room. When it all calmed down, Issei and the spell tome were both gone. Dimensional travel Takeshi mumbled feebly, a victorious final smirk on his average features. He looked up towards the man, his body hardly able to support the gesture, and gloated, you lose, fallen angel. With that, Issei found himself in a whole new world entirely. Zonia Mountain was one of the most remote and peaceful locations in all of Fiori. Standing hundreds of miles away from the nearest town, nestled in the northwestern part of the country, the tall mountain was the epicenter of an eternal cold. Whether caused by magic or a simple climate anomaly, no one ever bothered to find out, but some did believe in a supernatural connection. Mysterious wispy clouds consistently obscured the peak, inspiring rumors and superstitions among the locals. Local, as in only 20 miles away where there was a small settlement. Very few people claimed to have traveled to the peak and, as such, it was the perfect place for someone who didn't want to be found. That is, if they could endure the year-long cold spell and occasional snow showers. It wasn't that huge compared to some of the mountains east of Fiori, so it wasn't attractive to thrill-seeking mountain climbers. Besides, no one wanted to brave the awful weather. That was why Acnologia chose it as his refuge. Peace and quiet, free from some of his least favorite creatures in the world. Humans. He hated weakness, it was something that he never understood. As an enormous black dragon that could claim to be one of the 3 most powerful beings in Fiori, if not Earthland, he couldn't comprehend that no one else could attain the same strength as he did. Here, though, he wasn't bothered by anything and could exist in solitude with the only being he cared for, himself. In all honesty, he was human too, once upon a time. 400 years ago, there was a war between dragons and the humans they subjugated. One dragon had spoken out against their mistreatment of humans and as such sparked a rebellion throughout the entire world, but it had little chance of winning. Until a young black dragon decided to take in a white-haired orphan and train him in dragon magic, making him the first DragonSlayer. But that was long ago in another time and another life. Acnologia had long since overcome his weakness. It was there, curled at the top of the mountain, that the dragon noticed a foreign energy signature. He cracked open a beady pearly white eye and raised his rounded snout. Something was close, seeking his energy, even drawing on it for some type of magic he could hardly fathom. Unwittingly letting out an annoyed growl, he pressed his paws against the frozen rock and hauled his massive form onto all fours. The dragon, now awake and standing in all of his glory, was a sight to behold. His 40-meter-long body was covered with midnight black, round scales extending from his head to the tip of his tail, each linking together into an impenetrable armor. 2 great feathered black wings, like those of a massive bird, extended nearly 25 meters on each side, clearly capable of supporting his weight. His underbelly was a dull gray, contrasting with vibrant exotic blue patterns, overlaying the black scales and wings. His head was rounded, his snout blunt, and 4 backwards-facing scaled plates gave it a fierce visage. One look at the dragon would inspire dread in the most dauntless of hearts, not to mention seeing mouth full of sharp teeth. But for just a moment, this enormous dragon had doubts, that unfamiliar magic tugging at his own life force and drawing power for God knows what. He huffed, almost laughing at how weak the spell was, considering that the large amount of energy stolen was but a drop in his reservoir. Then, as suddenly as it came, it stopped. With a groan, he rested his body black on the ground and closed his eyes. Nothing could harm him, anyways, he knew. Still, he was absolutely not prepared for what came next. Mom. Dad. A shrill, high-pitched voice wailed from behind him. He whipped his head around and came face to face with a young, brown-haired child, maybe 5 years old. For a moment, he wasn't sure the kid noticed him, then the boy's eyes widened. He was sure the human was about to scream, terrified of the giant beast. "What did you do to them?" "Huh?" Did he hear the kid right? Instead of fleeing and yelling, the miniature human accused him straight to his face. In all honesty, Acnologia was nearly at a loss for words. "I did nothing to your parents." Something was unexplainable about this boy, as if he had immense power hidden within his feeble form. It was an odd feeling, one that the former Slayer dismissed quickly. He had been alive for too long to have something surprise him. Wait, speaking of surprise, how did this kid get here, and what did it have to do with that strange magic? It was a confusing situation. There was definitely no way that anyone with the puny magic he had in his system could brave the climb to get to the top. He decided that it was best to voice his question, as horrid as the thought of engaging in conversation with a child was. "What brought you here, weakling?" "My name's Issei." He shot back immediately. Acnologia growled threateningly. "Answer before I lose my patience." Issei's eyes went wide, but he refused to back down. "Mom woke me up and said there was bad peoples after us, so I went downstairs and Dad was doing weird things with a book and some white stuff making symbols on the floor, then someone came in the house and Dad said something funny, then he fell over and I was here and it's cold." The boy paused for breath, the dragon barely understanding the rushed sentence. "What did you do to him?" "Idiot," Acnologia huffed, irritated. "You say your father used a book as a reference to draw a symbol." The boy defiantly refused to answer. It didn't matter if he did, seeing as how the kid was probably too young to understand the situation. If Acnologia's suspicion was correct, then it was likely the father either tried to summon the black dragon himself or draw on his magic to take care of an intruder, as crazy as it sounded. Either that or the human created a teleportation circle, one that he obviously didn't have the magical ability to activate successfully. It was then that the dragon spotted an open book resting on the ground near the kid. Acnologia brought his snout uncomfortably close to the brunette, almost bumping him as he read the text on the open page. "Much of it is in a cryptic language unknown to even me," he mused. It was certainly an anomaly considering that he knew most ancient languages after living upwards of 400 years. There are words he recognized, however. Specifically, 2. Dimensional travel. That was a shock. Issei's father had the capability to travel dimensions. Unheard of. Well, it did apparently cost a man his life, so it was not without a price, but such a magic was nearly impossible. It was not even considered as a viable side project of the best minds and strongest mages. "What did you do?" Issei repeated, this time as a dangerously quiet mutter, tears forming in his eyes as he glared at Acnologia's wide eye. "Nothing. Your pathetic father used magic to send you to a different dimension." He huffed, continuing, "He was weak enough that it cost him his own life, and thus required a measly amount my magic to complete the spell." "Dad isn't dead." The boy cried out, the tears now rolling down his face. "You liar." Whether or not the kid had a hidden power, he was Balsi, the black dragon had to at least give him that. Acnologia sighed. This was just one of the many reasons that he couldn't stand humans. "I have no reason to lie." The boy fell back, landing on the rocky mountaintop, but he could care less about the pain. In fact, it was kind of welcome. He couldn't continue to deny it anymore. The dragon, intimidating as it was, told no lies and affirmed his fears. His father once enlightened him on what death was, it meant that he'd never see the person again. Ever. But he wanted to see his dad, he wanted to go back home. Why did his father have to leave him? He gazed at the ground, more sinister thoughts flashing through his mind. Acnologia was just about to turn around and go back to sleep to ignore this kid when the boy mumbled something. "You say Dad died because he was weak." The dragon grunted. "At least this human understood something about life. Just like you, Brett. I don't want to die." He yelled, not in fear, but in determination. "I'll show you, you ugly dragon." Whatever it was, something clicked right then for the immense dragon. An orphan child, left alone to fend for himself. A young boy, weak and frail but with an insatiable hunger for power. Someone who found a dragon, as if by luck or fate. Though he would never acknowledge the connections, his subconscious easily connected the dots. The only thing that was different was that Issei was from another dimension entirely, a concept that Acnologia had trouble coming to terms with. If he were to raise anyone as his DragonSlayer, it had to be someone special, unique, and a human foreign to this world certainly fit the criteria. The possibility of someone almost as destructive as himself. That made the dragon almost giddy with sick, sinister anticipation. "I am the Dragon King, Acnologia. You desire power, power that humans should never be able to attain. I can give you that." The boy looked hopeful. Yes, Acnologia grinned internally at the potential, you will be my DragonSlayer and my son. It didn't take more than a day for Issei to begin doubting his decision. His new father did almost nothing beyond bringing him food to eat, which wasn't much more than a few berries. Instead, Acnologia insisted that Issei learn to sustain himself solely on the dragon's magic energy. Sure, that would ascertain that the boy wouldn't die of starvation, but it did absolutely nothing to sate his hunger or thirst. Then there was the cold. It was the second night when a huge snowstorm blew in, trapping the mountain's peak in a dense cloud and near blizzard-level conditions. Through it all, however, Acnologia was sleeping peacefully, undisturbed, as if he had no idea that his new chair was well on his way to dying of hypothermia. The poor kid only had a shirt and pants on, not even shoes. The wind had an inherent chill which penetrated to the bones, making his extremities verge on going numb. It's so cold, Issei thought, his teeth chattering. All of the mountain was practically frozen, save a ring around Acnologia where the dragon's body heat melted all of it. Slowly, the kid made the connection. If he slept close to the dragon, then he'd be fine. Then again, the dragon didn't like it when he got too close. Whatever, it didn't matter since survival was more important than his grumpy father's mood. Decision made, he slowly hobbled over, his body shivering, and curled up against the black dragon's warm body. Issei had never felt so comfortable, despite the fact that he was laying on rocks. He could just fall asleep right then and there with no worries. What are you doing, brat? The voice snapped him out of his trance, though he didn't pick up on the annoyed tone. In response, he giggled a little, probably somewhat delirious, and tried hugging the dragon's stomach. You're so warm, he mumbled, content. I told you to sleep over there. He pointed a claw towards the other side of the mountaintop. Your actions are unbecoming for any child of mine. Not like Issei had any idea what that meant. It was really, really cold, and you're really, really warm, Issei rationalized flawlessly. It brought a groan from Acnologia. While he may have been considered human 400 years ago, he had no idea how to raise a kid, nor could he recall much information about humans in general, besides the fact that he was stronger than all of them. Most importantly, he had no idea how to refute Issei's childish logic. Surely, a human with as much potential as Issei could endure mere below freezing temperatures. How else would he be capable of facing an ice dragon one day? One look at his son made his heart soften a little. Issei was still shivering, but he had his eyes closed and a carefree expression, as if Acnologia would protect him. Of course the dragon would, Issei was his son after all. Perhaps his expectations were too high for a child so young. Fine, if you are to be my son, then I will protect you. Tomorrow, we will visit the closest human settlement to get you the appropriate clothing. Soon, however, you must learn to care for yourself. He supposed that he couldn't expect too much of the boy yet. For now, instead of learning how to properly train his son, it seemed he first had to figure out how to be a father. The next day, Issei awoke with a happy yawn, stretching his arms out a little. For the whole night, he didn't have a single nightmare about the attack on his parents. Equally exciting was the beautiful sunrise from his vantage point at the top of the mountain. So cool. He gasped in awe at the bright rays of orange and yellow gleaming from the horizon. That meant it had stopped snowing, didn't it? It was certainly warmer, if not by much. Finally, you're awake, his father huffed. The whole night, the dragon didn't sleep, afraid he might unknowingly crush his son. At least he had the benefit of not needing much sleep. Oh, hey dad. Weird, the kid had never called him dad before. It was better than the butchered attempts at Acnologia, but the dragon was adverse to being addressed in such an affectionate and casual way. They didn't call him the ruthless Dragon King for nothing. I am glad you slept so well, Acnologia replied, a hint of sarcasm accidentally leaking in. Hopefully, in a few years, the boy would have built up a resistance to the temperatures and would be competent at hunting for his own food. I did, Issei agreed, not really paying much attention to his father's words and instead looking off into the distance. Please, 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 can you make this last forever? The sunrise? The dragon questioned. When Issei nodded, he resisted his urge to berate the kid, instead settling on a simple, no. Oh, Issei sighed, downcast. But it looks super awesome. Great, his son used the phrase super awesome. If he wasn't careful, he would completely lose all self-respect and his infamous reputation would be thrown down the drain. We are going to the base of the mountain today. Take your book. He would not leave such an unusual and valuable item lying around. Carefully, after Issei grabbed the artifact, the dragon stood, scooping Issei up in his claw. It was just demeaning for a human to ride on a dragon's back, especially his, so he would have to carry his son the whole way there without dropping or crushing him. Fortunately, it was only a couple hundred miles to Lavender Town, a distance he could cover in less than an hour at Issei's safe speeds. After a gale of wind from his wings blew all the snow off of his home, the two were off. For Issei, the flight was remarkable. Seeing the world from this angle was eye-opening, an experience that put an enormous grin on his face. For a few moments, he had completely forgotten about what happened not 2 nights ago and lived completely and utterly in the present. Below the two, the mountains rushed by, eventually opening up to a grassy countryside. Even though he was gripped tightly on all sides, there was an undeniable sensation of freedom that prompted a single question. If all dragons get to fly, I want to be a dragon too. Amazingly, Acnologia heard the boy perfectly with his enhanced senses, negating the rushing wind. Good. I would expect no less. While Issei might have had no idea what his father said, he knew that Acnologia would be proud. The flight ended far before Issei wanted it to. After protesting relentlessly and even going as far as whacking Acnologia's nose with his book, he eventually gave up. In return, the dragon promised that one day he would be able to give Issei the ability to fly, provided that the brunette acted appropriate. And so the two landed a couple miles outside of the small town, hopefully out of eyesight of people that would spread rumors. Why did we land here? Issei complained. I don't want to walk. Quit complaining. That was followed by a sharp look. The boy opened his mouth but was cut off. Now, brat. Issei crossed his arms and huffed, trying to imitate the dragon's typical response while facing away from his father. You will listen to me, Issei. His father commanded, only he didn't sound as deep and frightening as usual. It also wasn't in his typical booming voice. Issei turned around, only to find himself looking upwards at a white-haired man. Huh? Where's Dad? He squinted at the adult, as if trying to deduce something, but couldn't find out what. Compared to his human parents, this guy was taller, more muscular, and oddly clothed. His longer than shoulder length, wild, dark blue hair was something Issei had never seen before. The man's eyes, too, had a thin yet dark ring around them, while the rest of his face was quite tan. He also bore strange blue markings, something that reminded Issei of the dragon that adopted him, and they matched a high-collared back cloak covered with similar patterns. The man actually laughed, only it more condescending than humored. You thought I would walk into the town as a dragon? He drawled. Well, the brat was only 5 years old. I don't get it, Issei pouted. Where is Dad? His name is Kuoh Acnologia. Looks like the kid wouldn't be winning any medals for his prodigal genius. Acnologia, brat. Follow me, you're wasting our time. He began heading north towards their destination, leaving Issei still a little baffled, even if the kid did follow him. As they made their way to town, Issei figured it out. How are you, Dad? He's an awesome dragon, and you're a weirdo. Awesome dragon, Acnologia mimicked in his head, letting out a sigh. Why couldn't he have said fearsome? Well, he owed his son an explanation, even if it would go right over his head. I use Chaos DragonSlayer magic. By having used this magic extensively to kill other pathetic dragons, I became the Dragon King. This form is far more practical yet not as powerful. I don't get it, the kid repeated. I know, Acnologia groaned inwardly. Acnologia seriously hoped that he would not regret this. So, brat, what do you want now? Acnologia was in human form for meditation purposes. He had claimed that it allowed him to be with the only company he cared for, his own, but that was after Issei was being particularly annoying. His eyes were closed, solely for the purpose of discouraging pointless conversation. Issei had no idea how the dragon knew he was there, which would be unnerving if the man wasn't his father. It's my birthday. Really? Acnologia huffed sarcastically. It was only the 5th time he had heard that all day. So, did you get me something? Issei prodded, leaning in close. No. Acnologia had no idea why people bothered celebrating birthdays. It wasn't as if someone had turned a year older on that date, no, they were merely a day older. Besides, he had lived so long that the distance in between being 401 years old and 402 years old was inconsequential. He was never the type to acknowledge that he had a bias anyways. Issei pouted. Not even a cape like yours. Cloak, not cape, Acnologia corrected firmly. Capes were pointless attire to him. And no, I bought you nothing. Wait, that left only one possibility in Issei's 5-year-old mind. That means you'll finally teach me DragonSlayer magic. He cheered. He leaned in closer for an answer. Almost sensing that, Acnologia opening his sharp blue eyes, fixing his son with a stare that almost made the boy jump. No. Chaos DragonSlayer magic, the kind Acnologia used, was dangerous. While other dragons could teach their slayers magic at such young ages, Acnologia would rather not disintegrate his son, since there was no way his body could take it. But the groan, the brunette responded, how else am I supposed to pay back the fallen angel? You promised me power, he accused, knowing the dragon had yet to deliver on that promise. It took a minute, then Issei heard a few chuckles, then it turned into an all-out cackle. It was a strange sound, completely foreign to the no-nonsense, sardonic tone that the dragon normally carried. You're worried about revenge. Acnologia laughed. Brat, you're Issei Hyoudou, my son, revenge is beneath you. Soon, you will be a dragon, and no creature could face your wrath and live, so you need not worry about such inconsequential things as revenge. Your mere existence would be an agent of retribution. Revenge? What's that? Issei would have added what is retribution, but he had no idea how to pronounce it, and his father hated when he mispronounced things. It probably stemmed from the boy butchering Acnologia so often. Acnologia wasn't too happy. Did he seriously have to teach his son what revenge meant? Though he may have instructed that boy in grammar, proper speech, and the abilities of dragons, he was still not the best teacher. Revenge is a petty thought. It is when you wish harm on someone who harmed you. Since you are my child, such thoughts are unnecessary because you will one day become so powerful that no one can harm you. Acnologia recalled with disdain a similar mindset that he held in his youth. It was why he began killing dragons after all. Like you? A strange chuckle returned. Yes. Issei thought for a moment, liking the sound of that. His old human father was killed by a fallen angel, supposedly, but he wouldn't need to worry about the past when he was tough and awesome like his dad. Yet, something still bugged him, making him reach down and pick up a familiar book, flipping open to the page he had bookmarked. What if I want to go home? Sure, he had a home here, and Acnologia treated him as a son, although it wasn't like he could forget about where he came from. Acnologia, for once, seemed to understand what the boy's thoughts were on the matter. When you return, it will be for your own curiosity, not for revenge on others. With that, he gave his dad a huge hug. At first, the dragon was clueless, shocked even, but eventually he began to accept that his son wasn't as cold-hearted as him. Safely in his father's arms, Issei mumbled quietly, "You're the best dad ever." "Issei. Are you listening?" The dragon roared. "What?" "Yeah, of course," he rubbed the back of his head, completely flustered. His father didn't move an inch and merely sighed. "Okay, I wasn't, but I am now," he added, as if that justified everything. The dragon leaned in close and made a dangerously low growl, a gesture that used to scare Issei, but hardly had an impact anymore. "I was planning on giving you a gift, but I have no obligation to grant you power, even if you are my son," he warned. "Whoa, wait. Seriously, you're going to teach me DragonSlayer magic now?" Issei was pumped since Acnologia said he would only teach him his magic when he was old enough and had enough exposure to the unusual energy. Now, at 10 years old, it seemed he was prepared. Chaos dragon magic was volatile at best, and magic that unstable had an extreme toll on the body. Any other dragon magic also had profound effects, the most noticeable being that the user, called a DragonSlayer, slowly transformed into a dragon after many years of utilizing it. Chaos dragon magic accelerated this process and would easily kill the user if they were incapable of adapting to the potent energy, meaning that they couldn't be too old when they learned it. It was also lethal if the user was too young, overwhelming their body and killing them instantly. Issei especially was vulnerable to this when taken into account that he was not from Earthland. While Earthland mages had containers within their bodies that replenished themselves with the energy in the air called Ethernano, Issei had no such container. His body stored the energy all throughout, which would make it easier for chaos dragon magic to negatively affect him. Because he had been feeding Issei small amounts of his magic ever since his son was 5 years old, Acnologia strongly believed that if the boy accepted the magic, then it would work without incident. That Acnologia had deemed Issei already was a huge excitement for the latter. Someday, Issei could be a dragon, just like his old man. That was his dream. Well, one of his dreams. "Are you ready?" Acnologia asked, though no part of it was a question. He would pump the kid full of magic no matter what the reply was. Issei nodded vigorously. "Yeah." The black dragon grinned, feeling a darker version of Issei's anticipation. After all, he couldn't leave a weak legacy. "This will hurt." With that, the dragon tapped a giant claw to Issei's chest. Strange blue energy gathered at the tip before flowing unbridled into Issei. The boy glowed blue for a second, then smirked. "I don't feel any guaya." The next second, he was on the ground, writhing in pain as the energy coursed through his veins like fire. He was unable to think, to curse his father for not warning him of just how insane the pain was. His legs wouldn't work, he couldn't stand. He couldn't haul himself onto his knees. All he could do was cry out in agony. Then, there was a moment, a hiatus, where he took a deep breath and tried to clear his head. But it wasn't over, it was just the eye of the storm, only for it to hit him in full force once more. However, this time it wasn't his whole body, just his left hand. It was like someone had poured acid onto it, skinned it, then rubbed salt in the wound for good measure, only to decide that it wasn't bad enough. By leaps and bounds, it was the worst sensation of his life. While clutching his arm, he hardly noticed a strange gauntlet forming on it, a deep red with an emerald gem glowing a lucid green. Acnologia was reminded of the hand of a dragon. Then, the gauntlet changed, shifting into its second stage, growing larger and gaining yellow spikes, covering his entire forearm past the elbow. But that did nothing to ease the cruel torment. Crack. The suffering ended. Strange metal pieces, formerly covering his hand, littered the ground below him. The gauntlet had shattered. Issei was panting, sweat dripping off of his forehead and his body still convulsing slightly. While cradling his injured and sore arm, he shifting himself to a sitting position, glaring at his father. Acnologia never warned him that gaining power hurt this much. Then again, Issei thought, clenching his working hand into a fist, I feel great. Now, he was sturdier, fearless, and brimming with energy. Thanks, Dad. Though he was still smiling, the statement had a serious tone since it was a vital step for Issei. Acnologia, however, didn't bother to respond. He was too focused on those odd metallic remnants of what used to be a gauntlet. Sure, as the first DragonSlayer he was familiar with problems and compatibility issues, but he had never seen anything like this. Whatever was laying on the ground was the unawakened source of Issei's hidden power, one of the first things the dragon had sensed all those years ago. It smelled almost familiar, almost like a dragon. Now, the energy stored within the artifact was flowing through the air, gleaming an ethereal red. Dad. Issei prompted. No, brat, I don't know, the dragon bit back. This thing is from your old world. Issei. So what is it? It was more rhetorical, considering that his father already answered. Normally, this would prompt an agitated response from the dragon, but the two were so baffled that the comment went unnoticed. The disembodied voice rumbled with laughter. The dragon bared his teeth, and Issei gulped. Maybe I can help with that. The voice was deep, draconic like Acnologia's. The red mist gathered together, coalescing into a solid mass. As it began to take shape, the two instantly realized what it was. A dragon. It was tiny, only a couple feet taller than Issei, and was just as red as the mist it formed from. It resembled a western dragon with sharper features than Acnologia, red scales covering the entire body with them lighter on the underbelly. Its wings had a pale membrane as opposed to the black dragon's feathers, and its eyes were a deep green. I am Ddraig, the Welsh dragon, one of the two heavenly dragons. The dragon, clearly a he, stated in a voice nearly as deep as Acnologia's own. Thank you for freeing me from the sacred gear, though I must ask how. Acnologia huffed. Giving Issei my magic eradicated all traces of inferior magic from his body. You must be pathetic. Ddraig bristled at that. At full power, I could destroy you, whelp. He then sighed. This is a different world, right? I heard it when I was still sealed. Your magic follows foreign rules, that was probably how it broke the sacred gear. Those things were created by God, it was thought impossible to free a being from them. Your God must be a joke. Ddraig glared. No matter how you look, you're far too weak to break his rules, it must be this world's magic. There is no other explanation. The two were face to face, an odd sight with a size difference. Neither wanted to back down. The tension in the air was thick now, the powerful presence of the two dragons bearing down on Issei like an impending storm. You are in my territory, I suggest you respect me, Acnologia threatened. I am Acnologia, the Dragon King, the black dragon from the Book of Apocalypse, and I will not be talked down to by some runt. You dragon kings are all too prideful, Ddraig thought, irate. Though, the larger dragon was right, he was far too weak at the moment to risk an all-out fight. He also wasn't keen on putting the boy, the one was originally supposed to be his partner, in danger. After trying to follow the conversation while trying to understand the effects of the ritual on his body, Issei was lost. Wait. What's going on? The Welsh dragon answered. When you were born, a sacred gear was placed in you by God. Eventually, when you were transported here by means I don't remember, I came with you, sealed within that sacred gear. After Acnologia did whatever to make you a so-called DragonSlayer, his magic purged the sacred gear from your body and broke it, releasing my spirit. Acnologia added on, speaking to Ddraig, the object that transported you to this world is the tome laying by my son. He pointed a giant claw at the grey, snow-covered book laying by Issei. Okay, Issei replied, placing his hand on his chin while he addressed Ddraig. But why are you so small? You look weak. Wow, Ddraig thought, dejected, he does not pull punches. Until today, he liked to think he was deserving of his feelings of pride. Now, he was made fun of by his own partner and would definitely get mocked by his rival, Albion, for his size. My body was destroyed when I was trapped in the gear. It seems to have reformed, somehow, though much smaller from my life force being weakened by God. I'll probably go back to normal size in a few years. Awesome. Issei cheered. When you're back to normal, I want to see Dad kick your butt. He likes killing dragons, and he said he'd take me along as soon as I become a DragonSlayer, cause he wants me to be a dragon too. He's your father, and you want to be a dragon. What was he talking about? Killing dragons to become one, that was almost as absurd as a dragon taking a human as his son. Acnologia grunted. Our magic is impossible for the human body to handle. It changes them into a dragon in time, and the process can be expedited by bathing in the blood of dragons, something my son is eager for. Ddraig tried not to shiver. If they chose to kill him now, they could. He was barely a match for a high-class devil at the moment, though he would never admit it. Acnologia gave a sick grin at his fellow dragon's discomfort. Do not fret, Ddraig. You can stick around. Issei needs a tutor to teach him about this earth he comes from. Besides, I am curious to see the power you claim to have. I am tired of crushing vermin and long for a challenge. Just what had the world's most unluckiest dragon gotten himself into this time? A power-hungry kid who wants to be a dragon, and a crazy, warmonger of a father who finds everything but himself and his son to be pathetic weak trash. Why did his former host have to be the one to end up in some other crackpot world where the laws of nature were turned on their head? At least I am out of that blasted thing. If I ever find the means to return, kicking Albion's ass will be like taking a morning flight. The thought of Albion's jealousy of his freedom brought a genuine grin to his face. If that was the case, then he wasn't the world's unluckiest dragon after all. Maybe dealing with these two won't be a problem. It's not like I have anything better to do. His decision made, he leaned over until his was even with Issei's ear. If Acnologia calls himself your father, you can call me Uncle Ddraig. Got that, partner? Issei hugged the red dragon's neck. You've got it, uncle. From then on, Issei's life got even crazier. I, who is about to awaken, Issei began, taking an unsteady breath, am the heavenly dragon, who has stolen the principles of domination from God. Oh, man, he just hoped you remembered this right. I laugh at the infinite, and I grieve at the dream. Acnologia would never approve of this, but Issei didn't care. For the moment, the black dragon was occupied by more important matters. I shall become the red dragon of domination. And I shall sink you to the depths of the crimson purgatory. He finished the chant by striking a pose, fist pointed towards the sky. Then there was silence. The boy waited a few seconds, but nothing happened. Hey, partner, what are you up to? Issei yelped, twisting to face the voice behind him. The DragonSlayer gave a nervous chuckle, rubbing the back of his head and shifting his gaze. Hi Uncle Ddraig. The Welsh dragon was much larger now, over twice the height of Issei with a far more intimidating presence. I thought you were asleep. He was answered with a sigh. I was. Until I heard someone reciting the chant for Juggernaut Drive. You do realize that the sacred gear only works when it's on your arm, and I'm sealed in it, right? It wasn't the first time Issei had tries to use the sacred gear after hearing Ddraig talk about how much power it gave the wielder. At one point, he had fruitlessly tried to stick the pieces back together. Yeah, I know, Issei mumbled, put off. He plopped down on the rock, the cold ground hardly nautical anymore. It's just that I don't want Dad to be disappointed. The Red Dragon Emperor recognized this pattern well. A few of his hosts had not lived up to expectations set upon them by family, but none of them had Acnologia as a father. That dragon took things to the extreme. Partner, when he didn't get the boy's attention, he tried again. Issei, you're young. You can't expect to defeat a dragon only a year after learning DragonSlayer magic, no matter what your father says. Yeah, the boy countered, well then how else am I supposed to become a dragon? He was almost snarling at this point. Honestly, Ddraig had no idea why his partner wanted to be a dragon so badly. Humans could be strong too, no matter what Acnologia claimed, he had seen it plenty of times, and those humans were hailed as heroes. The red dragon, ironically, was learning from Acnologia how to take a human form after learning that the chaos dragon could appear human. If he ever were to return to Earth, it would help immensely with remaining inconspicuous and not prompting all three factions to attack. Anyways, Ddraig had a nephew to calm down. You already resemble your father. With his aid, it can't take more than another year. Sure enough, with each dragon Acnologia and Issei killed, the latter gained more draconic features. Though the kid couldn't actually defeat a dragon, Acnologia knew some trick to speed up the process at least 10 times, meaning Issei looked less and less human by the day. It freaked Ddraig out, knowing the boy was gaining this power through murder, even if he didn't realize it. You think so? There were practically stars in his eyes now. Surely, Issei knew that he looked far from human. Sharp teeth and fangs glinted in his mouth when he smiled. His pupils were slits now, threatening to disappear to resemble something closer to Acnologia's freaky pupilless orbs. Miniature black claws adorned his fingers and toes, and small, skin-colored scales were forming over a quarter of his body. There were blue markings near each eyebrow and decorating each upper arm, a less obvious version of the vibrant decorations on his father's scales. Acnologia had once likened his appearance to Dragon Force, whatever that was. It seemed, though, that there was no changing back to human until he was a full dragon. But what if I still can't kill a dragon, Issei worried. Then I'll help you, you're my partner after all. He had to change the topic before Issei got gloomy. It was tough to see such a cheerful kid beat down by such a ridiculous and arbitrary premise that his father forced on him. Want to go flying? That always got the kid's mind off of his problems. Awesome. Issei had jumped on his uncle's back in a heartbeat. Yeah, his new partner was a handful, but he'd deal with it. He always did. Issei was 14 now, and he had changed quite a bit. For one, his presence and posture had become intimidating, especially since he stood at 5'6", a good height for his age. If it weren't for Ddraig's lessons in concealing his presence, magic power would have radiated off of him uncontrollably with a frightening blue aura. Such was the aura of a dragon, especially when said dragon was the adopted son of the dragon of the apocalypse. That didn't mean Issei held a candle to his old man, or Ddraig for that matter, but he couldn't consider himself fully human anymore. While his hair was still brown and messy and his build lithe, there were two clearly noticeable differences. 1. He had put some muscles on his thin frame, which was kind of irrelevant to his real strength, but it at least didn't make him look like a wimp. 2. He had gained tattoos similar to the ones his father had in both human and dragon form. The electric blue symbols and swirls were etched along his arms and chest, a sign that the DragonSlayer had reached a point far beyond what was intended by the magic. It was like the markings of Dragon Force, a stage where a slayer could temporarily access the power of a dragon when the body would appear more draconic. Issei and Acnologia, since they both were really dragons assuming a human form, no matter what Zareth claimed, had these markings permanently. Ddraig too had changed over this time. While it was not as drastic as Issei's, he had regained some of his old power, now standing at half the height of Acnologia. In a true insult to his pride, Issei was a head taller in dragon form, even if the teen was weaker. It was a touchy subject that was obviously brought up every time Issei had one of his lessons with the Welsh dragon. That wasn't the only thing different about the dragon. In addition to the slow return to his former glory, Acnologia had finally taught him how to appear human. Ever since he first learned how to properly perform the magic, he had spent far more time as a human than as a dragon. Currently, Ddraig was supervising his nephew at the closest town, lavishly called Lavender Town. Unlike the name might suggest, it was a down-to-earth place with very few wealthy and poor people. As it was in a remote location, it had very little contact with the rest of Fiori, something Ddraig appreciated even if the others didn't. Acnologia liked its proximity while Issei loved the shops, especially the bookstore. Ever since Ddraig taught the boy to read, both kanji and Earthland's written word, he always liked reading. Either way, all three agreed that they needed a break from the frigid mountain. Acnologia had wandered off long ago, leaving Issei and Ddraig to walk through the streets alone, attracting a lot of attention. See, Ddraig had such an attractive presence, as all dragons from his world did, that brought a lot of talk from the ladies. It didn't hurt that his human form was good looking, far more than he could say for the Chaos duo. His hair was a mid-neck length flaming red, falling down to his brow with spiky looking bangs, and his eyes were the same fiery color. While only slightly thinner than Acnologia, he was well toned, and he didn't bother wearing 6 cloaks to cover himself. Unlike the white-haired dragon, he always wore a red t-shirt and black pants, nothing fancy. Issei, on the other hand, wore a black and blue cloak over his clothes, much like his father. "Partner, I need to ask you something," Ddraig began. "Yeah? You're always asking me about my nights with women." It was well known in Lavender Town that Ddraig was a player, often sleeping with 1 or even 2 chicks at some point during each visit. Issei, for some reason, loved the tales of his conquests much to Acnologia's disgust. "Yuhe. They're really interesting," the boy replied. Ddraig flashed a sneaky grin. "So what is my Dracoling up to, spending so much time in the adult section of the bookstore on the trips?" Issei turned beet red. "But, he always checked to make sure he wasn't followed." I have no idea what you're talking about. My nephew is discovering women for the first time." Ddraig cried, comical tears flowing from his eyes as he threw his arms around his buddy. "I never thought I'd see the day." "Ah. You're squeezing me too tight." Ddraig relented a little. "I'll tell you what, Issei. Let's make a deal. I get Acnologia to buy you 1 book to bring home if you do something for me." Issei's cheeks were red now, but he didn't want to hide his shame. This was an awesome deal. Short of his uncle buying him an erotic movie Lacrima, there was no better gift for a horny teen. "I'll do anything." There was one thing that Acnologia staunchly kept from Ddraig, telling Issei to never give the red dragon it. "I want you to let me see that spellbook from our world." Bildertz Clive, S-class mage of fairy tale, was horrible at information gathering. See, he wasn't really the suave clever guy that most people found themselves spilling their secrets to. He had the looks for suave. Stubble, ginger hair, a muscular build, kind of the badass. The easiest way to describe it would be that he was good with women, but a little absent-minded. While he wasn't looking for personal secrets, he still had a terrible time trying to find information on the strange black monster that had been sighted around Lavender Town. For nearly 100 years, small villages had disappeared, and the council had issued a special quest for any powerful mages to find and slay the beast. None had returned. There were all kinds of superstitions, and he had trouble finding out which were bogus. Hopefully, though, whatever he found at the peak of Mount Zonia wasn't the omnipotent annihilator of those myths. He hadn't let loose for years, and the prospect of an all-out fight to get justice for the beast's destruction made him eager. Still, he was weary of what he would find at the top, but he didn't even waver in his march up the mountain. Recently, too, there had been more sightings of the monster, and enormous craters had started appearing in Fiori with strange sightings of a black dragon near them. If it really was a dragon, it definitely wasn't the kind that Natsu loved. He took a deep breath, steadying himself and cracking his knuckles. It had took him years to find the dragon's location, yet the hardest and most dangerous leg of his journey lay ahead. If only it wasn't snowing, he could be focused. There. A shadow in the dense cloud, the shape of a person. "Hey." He called out. As he got closer, he could make out the features on the man. Messy brown hair, a large black cape with blue designs. It was hard to tell, but the man appeared to be a teen and was thin, more like a civilian than a mage. "Hey, kid. There's a dangerous monster here, get away." "Monster?" the teen replied. "The hell, man. Not cool. My dad's a dragon, much better than a weirdest monster." "Your dad?" Gilderts replied, jaw hanging open. Quickly, he compassed himself, his determined grin returning. "So you're a DragonSlayer then?" "I guess you could say that," the kid shrugged. "But I'm much more powerful than a normal DragonSlayer," he finished with a grin. Gilderts crossed his arms. "Then, before you try to fight me, let me ask you one thing." He was met with a nod. "How do you call that thing that destroyed villages your father?" The teen barely needed to think to answer that. They were too weak to defend themselves, so they deserved it. "Dad could wipe out the country, but he chooses not to cause you aren't worth it and cause uncle would be super pissed." The mage groaned. 3 opponents, no wonder it's a 100-year job. He couldn't back down now, not when he would shame Fairy Tail's name. "Fine then. Before we start, what's your name, kid?" "I'm Gilderts, here to stop you guys." Sometimes, he was just too laid back for dramatics. "Dad doesn't like it when I give humans my name," he pondered aloud. "Whatever, I'm Issei, here too well my dad told me to beat you." "Man, I wanted that to be cooler." "I'll warn you, I'm bad at holding back," Gilderts admitted, letting loose a little magic power. "Well, Dad's letting me read my adult book when I win," Issei replied, grinning like mad. "So let's get it on." "Adult book, huh?" Gilderts chuckled. Sounded like kid was just as quirky as Natsu, the DragonSlayer in Fairy Tail, though Issei was evil. "Hell yeah." The declaration was followed by an enormous roar from the teen as a huge wave of blue-colored magic left his mouth. Gildert simply held up a hand and used his crash magic to nullify the entire attack. Though it was a technique that could eliminate almost all ranged attacks, his hand was red, burning with a little pain. "Man, Fairy Tail's ace thought, can't let that hit me by surprise. I'd be done for." Gilderts took the moment to drop his large cape to the ground, revealing his muscled arms and thin body more. Issei, in turn, took off his own overcoat. The blue tattoos decorating his arms in intricate designs were clearly a manifestation of his magic, Gilderts noted. But the boy used no magic circle or words, so the mage didn't know what element he used. "Here he comes." Issei charged at the man, bringing back his right arm. As with Natsu's attacks, Gilderts noticed a blue energy gathering around his hand, but something else was happening. His arm was growing scales, and his hand was now tipped with wicked claws. Chaos Dragon's Fist. By the time Gilderts blocked the attack with his forearm, he was blown away by the force, knowing there would be a bruise later. He couldn't waste the opportunity, so he slammed the kid's arm with one elbow and gathered white crash magic in the other hand, punching him in the chest. Issei skidded back, his dragon arm on his chest. The reprieve for the two lasted moments when Gilderts reached out a hand as if to grab Issei, sending a wave of crash magic. Issei, knowing there was no dodging, dove headfirst at the man, punching him again with his dragon arm. Deftly moving to the side, Gilderts slapped the punch away before returning with a left hook. Issei tried blocking, but he didn't have the experience or reaction time. Ignoring the sickening crack of the powerful hit on his jaw, he gathered blue magic at his Furor kick. After he was blocked, the two launched into a flurry of punches and kicks. While Issei was quick, using his magic with expert precision, Gilderts was experienced and packed a mean punch. The two traded blows until Gilderts saw an opening, grabbing Issei's hand mid-swing and blasting the boy away with a condensed beam of crash magic. Issei flew through the air over 20 feet, landing flat on his back, suffering only minor bruising. "You're strong for a human," Issei complimented, dusting himself off as he stood. "But I'm a dragon, and you have no hope of defeating me." The Fairy Tail mage wondered for a moment how the kid could be so upbeat, if a bit pervy one moment and condescending the next. The scales traveled over his entire body before his physique bulked up considerably and he grew a couple feet. His face pushed out, looking like a dragon's blunted maw, and sharp teeth filled his mouth. The blue lines covered his entire body as his shirt ripped off, two bird-like wings growing from his back. His feet and other hand grew claws, and his head grew 4 backwards-facing plates, resembling horns. Then his eyes turned fully white, with no pupil, giving him a far more demonic appearance. In seconds, he had gone from human to humanoid dragon. Gilderts exclaimed. "Okay, fine then. I guess I have to go all out." With an excited grin, a wide aura appeared around the man. For 5 full feet around his body, the pale energy raged from the ground, ripping the ground itself and pushing all of the snow away from the man. The light extended like a beacon hundreds of feet into the air. "Come on," the mage commanded. Issei obliged with a roar, body bursting alive with blue energy. The energy then converged in his wings and legs, and his pushed off his clawed feet, speeds barely visible to a mage as adept as Gildert's. He then crashed into the mage with a powerful headbutt, only to be met with that white crash magic. Boom! There was an enormous explosion as the two destructive magics clashed, creating a huge hole in the side of the mountain and sending rocks tumbling down. Damn, that hurt, Gildert's thought, planning his next move. While the redheaded mage was falling into the large crater the two just created, Issei remained high in the air with his wings, crossing his arms. There was no way he could successfully attack the kid in this position. "Fine then, I'll get him next time he comes at me." "Pathetic," the teen muttered, taking a deep breath in. The dense clouds, the air, and even some of the snow on the grounds was pulled up, as if fueling the next attack. "Hey, going to try that breath attack again," the mage knew. For a few 10 seconds, Issei gathered the energy in his body, a tumultuous storm easily felt by anyone in the vicinity. Then, he roared. It shook the mountain as a huge, dense beam of blue light, 20 yards across, was sent crashing towards his opponent. Shit. Then there was a huge cloud of debris, the crater now extending halfway towards the mountain's base, and the rest of the mountain was barely large enough to support a peak above them. Issei panted as the dust died down, knowing that he was nowhere near strong enough to do that twice, and that was banking on it taking up his opponent's energy or killing him. It was a powerful roar, easily enough to destroy a town. He wasn't fighting a town though, he was fighting a mage, one that was clearly powerful. But no matter that he wouldn't go full dragon to beat this opponent. It would kill his father's opinion of him. So, no matter how tired he was going to finish this guy off in his hybrid form. As the dust died down, something moved in the center. Issei ducked, pushing himself down with his wings, as a giant glowing net of disassembly magic flew over his head. That was a close. His thought was interrupted by a golden fist buried deep in his stomach. Shit, he had flown too far down to avoid it. Hajakens, Itten. Gildert's exclaimed with stalwart determination in his eyes. In a huge bolt of spiraling white gold energy, the powerful uppercut sent Issei flying hundreds of feet into the sky. Quickly, he beat his wings, steadying himself with some magic power, then dropped back lower. Blood was dripping from his maw, that punch had been powerful. It seemed his opponent fared even worse. Fairy Tail's ace was battered, his clothes tattered from the dragon's roar, and he was taking deep breaths, wiping sweat from his brow. That he managed to block the roar, leaving an insanely tall pillar supporting him, was an amazing feat. When it came to tactics, the man was definitely no slouch either. It was an intense fight, though quick, and both were feeling the effects. Issei coughed out some blood. "My ribs are bruised. I'd have never thought that there were humans this strong and talented out there." "You're tough, kid," Gildert's complimented. Issei wiped the blood from himself with an arm, lowering himself to be eye level with his enemy. "Not bad," he complimented. "I didn't know DragonSlayers had the power you do." "I'm trying to imagine the kid in my guild as a ferocious fire dragon," Gildert's thought aloud, ignoring the intense mood. "Ah, never mind me, I'm kin to getting old. You know, for a human, you're alright," Issei decided, letting out a smile. Of course, it looked particularly vicious with all the sharp teeth. But the piece couldn't last. "I've still got some fight left in me," Gildert's claimed, rolling his shoulder. He activated his crash magic, shattering the pillar immediately below him, letting him fall to the base of the crater. He looked up to see the human dragon descending gracefully. Man, wings were badass, he decided. "You're almost out of magic power after blocking the roar. You should probably leave before anything happens," Issei suggested. He refused to admit how evenly matched they were. The man chuckled, amused. "I'm a mage of fairy tale, kid. I may not be able to beat your father if he's any stronger than you, but I'm not backing away from a good fight. Maybe I'll knock some sense into you and you'll tell him that you should protect the weak, not kill them." "Protect them? What?" Issei never heard such a thing, not even from Ddraig. Sure, his father protected him once or twice, but that was because Issei was going to become a dragon, practically a symbol of power. He didn't understand what obligation he'd have to protect random people without purpose. "Yep," Gildert's affirmed. "Weak, strong, it doesn't matter. Everyone's got a story, kid, and no one deserves to have theirs cut short. One day, when you have friends, loved ones you want to protect, not even the fate of the world will weigh heavier than their lives. Then, you'll understand." Issei stared for a moment, digesting the words. This human, far weaker than either of his teachers, suddenly sounded far wiser than the two combined. Sure, he didn't understand the words at all, hardly considering them all. But he still considered it, if just for a moment. "Imbecile." A voice roared, an enormous shadow descending over the battlefield. Gildert's looked up as the shape slowly made itself clear. It was a dragon, a quadrupedal replica of Issei, but much, much larger. It dwarfed the two exponentially, and the power and rage radiating off the beast was practically palpable. The thought struck him that this was the kid's father. It roared, slashing a claw at Gildert's left leg. In a panic, he tried to block it with his left hand, using all of the magic he had left to prevent injury. Then, he heard a sickening sound, the sound of flesh being ripped open. "He cut through my defense like it was nothing," Gildert's gasped, coughing up blood. His left arm and leg laid on the ground, completely severed. "Shit, I need a hospital." He could barely stand on his remaining leg, but he wasn't going to lay down for this bastard. "You fill my son's head with lies," the dragon roared, baring his teeth inches from the man's face. "I would kill you, vermin, but it is not my place." Issei. Put off by the surprise amputation of his new sort of friend, Issei could hardly think about such a thing. "You want me to?" He coughed up more blood, wiping it away before his father noticed. "You heard me?" His father shouted back angrily. I can't." Issei protested. "Please, he's not weak. He's strong, like me." Though he was using less than a quarter of his power, the maximum that he could hold in this form, he knew that any human facing a fourth of a dragon's power was beyond impressive. Acnologia huffed angrily. "Strong? Ha. He could barely contend with your hybrid form. Has Ddraig convinced you to act this pathetic? Do not make me repeat myself." When Issei did nothing, the black dragon moved away, threateningly placing a razor-sharp claw on the teen's scaled chest. "You may have power, my son, but it pales in comparison to mine. Do not defy me." Gildert's grinned. "Remember what I said. Just kill me and get it over with, make your dad proud." He accepted his fate. If that dragon wanted him dead, there was nothing that would stop him, not even his son. Issei rubbed at his eye, feeling a wetness there. A tear. He shouldn't be able to cry, he wasn't even human. How was he this weak? Gildert's. I'm sorry." Without any further words he closed his eyes and drove his hand towards the man's heart, intent on ending it quickly to prevent suffering. But it never reached the mage, caught by a smaller human hand. "That's enough, you two." "Ddraig?" Issei mumbled, the word barely forming on his dry tongue. The red-haired man gave him a reassuring smile, letting his hand go. Slowly Issei's black scales receded and his jaw returned to normal, leaving the DragonSlayer entirely human. He wasn't sure what caused that to happen, only that he knew that he wasn't going to be a monster and kill this man. What he was just about to do disgusted him. Gildert's was strong, maybe even strong enough to beat Issei in his hybrid form, but now no one would know thanks to Acnologia's interference. "It's alright, Issei, you don't have to be a mindless killing machine." "Is that what you wanted, Acnologia?" Ddraig questioned, looking up. "You dare interfere, Ddraig." It was growing dangerous again, the two releasing their potent energies. It was a time bomb. The man scowled. "I know all about how you raise Issei. You teach him that everyone else is worthless, ants that can be easily crushed. You're a terrible father, Acnologia. All you want is power, that's all you ever wanted." "Oh?" The dragon replied, inches away from the Welsh. "And I am sure you are a more capable teacher." The bitter sarcasm was obvious, rage fueling the dragon. Ddraig decided to turn to Issei, ignoring the dragon that was way beyond acceptable boundaries, inches from taking his head off. "You can come with me, or stay with your father. I'm getting this guy medical attention." With that, he walked over the still-standing Gilderts and draped the man over. "Thanks," the mage said quietly. Issei looked between his father and his uncle, trying to run thoughts through his head as fast as possible. On one hand, his father was there his entire life. He had always delivered on his promises and always gave Issei a way to become stronger. But Ddraig was right, Acnologia really only cared for himself. He wanted Issei as a slayer for his own legacy, not to help Issei. Ddraig, though, he put up with the black dragon just to teach Issei about Earth. He even taught him how to read and write in both worlds' languages, considering that Acnologia hadn't deemed the skill important. Then there was what Gilderts told him. A thought struck him. Has my dad even been nice? Sure, he sometimes praised Issei, but he was always so harsh about it. Often he could be flat-out cruel. In the books, not the adult kind, he read, though he dismissed it at the time as heresy, the parents were understanding and compassionate. And so he made his decision. "I love you, Dad," Issei was almost in tears, eyes watering, "but I'm leaving with Uncle Ddraig." Surprisingly, the dragon wasn't upset. Instead, he fixed Issei with a look only he could understand, the same look he had when he first found the boy. "When you grow hungry for more power, you have only yourself to blame. When you find you are unable to protect those you grow compassionate for, you will crave destruction. You are my legacy, my son, no matter what your whelp of an uncle says. And when you realize this, I will not be there to help you." He spread his wings and faced away from Issei. Then, with a gust of wind, Acnologia was gone, soaring off into the snowy sky, vanishing into the whiteness. Once again, Issei's father had left him. End of the here. So that's it for today's video, guys. Before you go, just like the video and share it with your friends. Bye.